Recording. Can you hear me? Riley? All right.
Hi, folks. It's welcome to the second virtual tasting. So we're going to be tasting our.
Is this the second or third?
I don't know, Billy. It's been this last year. I don't know. I think it was the second. Maybe Riley knows. Does anybody know? Okay, it's the third. Anyway, this is going to be our May shipment release, and it's 3 wines as usual. And we're going to start off here. Billy, why don't you tell us about what's going on in the vineyard?
Well, first of all, a shout out to Dick and Jenny and the winemaker dinner they did last night in Orange County, because it's the first one in probably a year and a half to 2 years that was actually in-house and not virtual.
And it was really spectacular. We had a great turnout, and we even had one of our older fans bring in a bottle of our 98 Mamir vineyard, which was the hit of the show. So anyway, it was quite an experience.
And also, maybe we're just hoping that we'll be able to do this live tasting with everybody at the pickup party for the next release. We're really hoping for that to get everybody back to the winery and either in the whatever for the wine pickup party. And then want to talk a little bit before we get into these wines on what's happening in the vineyard right now. This is bloom time for us, and it's a very sensitive time in the vineyard in that when they start flowering, all these clusters start flowering, and each one of those little tiny flowers is going to become a berry, and all of those berries will become a cluster. So the weather this time of year couldn't be more important for us. It needs to be mild. It needs to be rain-free. It needs to be pretty much free from gusty spring winds that we get every year. And it just needs to be mild. And we've had that so far. And it looks like in the vineyard, we have a lot of fruitfulness that is a potential for a good crop. And we've had mild spring weather, and it's been really nice. I just wake up every morning and wonder when those ferocious winds are going to start up the Santa Maria Valley and the Santa Ynez Valley, but it hasn't happened yet. So we're looking pretty good and looking forward to a good year. So how this is going to work is this is Foxen baseball. I'm going to do the play-by-play. Dick's going to add color, and we'll just move inning to inning here. We've got a 3-inning tasting tonight. We're going to start with the once-off for us so far, the 2018 Pinot Noir from the Nielsen Vineyard. Nielsen Vineyard, planted in 1964 by Uriel Nielsen and Bill DiMattei, table grape growers from the Central Valley. Around Delano, and they just had some property over here and came over, and there was a UC Davis report back in the 60s that had something to do about the potential for growing wine grapes on the Central Coast. And so they bought into that, and they planted this vineyard in 64. And
it was the first, was it not, Billy?
It was the first in our viticultural generation. Right. Yeah. And then, of course, 2 years later, Ernesto Wickenden was planted, 1966. So we were also involved viticulturally in that first generation planting. These grapes were originally sourced by the Christian brothers. And then once they discovered how good the fruit was, it started spreading around Napa, and we had a whole wave of Napa producers back in the 60s and 70s coming down here to buy this fruit. And word got around of the quality of this area. This Pinot Noir, I think, is second generation Nielsen, probably planted in the 90s, along with some of our Julia's blocks that were planted in the 90s too.
So Billy, indicative of this wine here, I understand. I was looking here, and the clone is the Swan clone.
It's
That was
Swan
one of-
clone.
That's one of the older clones, which would be indicative of the early
Okay,
planting.
so the whole clonal issue with Pinot Noir, when you have a named clone, not a numbered clone, but a named clone, I could say Swan, Calera,
Martini.
Martini, all those sources. A clone is actually just a genetic mutation of a cluster of Pinot Noir. So it just expresses itself in a different way, and you select that and isolate it, and it becomes a clone. Some of these clones, it's a mystery where they came from, but for the most source, including Swan, Calera, they say, and Mount Eden, they say are sourced from Romani Conti. We don't know that, but they were suitcase clones. I remember when I was at Chalon in the late 70s, early 80s, that Josh Jensen had a suitcase clone, and that was actually the Calera clone that he brought back. It was from Romani Conti, and we planted a mother block at Chalon and grew that wood for him to plant the Calera over the hill from us in when he established that vineyard. This Nielsen vineyard, it sits on the east end of the Santa Maria AVA, so it's a bit warmer. For example, from block 8, it's probably 4.5, 5 miles. So we're talking about during the growing season, a 4.5 to 5 degree difference during the summer. So it does ripen a little sooner. Swan clone is a beautiful little clone. It's full of hens and chicks, hens being the bigger berries, chicks being the little tiny berries that don't have any seeds. So a lot of more skin to juice ratio than juice to skin.
Which is what we're looking for.
And again, I'm saying this was the only vintage we did this so far. What's happened to us in our history is that what I call the sea smoke syndrome, where estate wineries are selling us fruit and we get better scores than them, and so they cut us off.
So is it a one-time deal with Nielsen?
It was a one-time deal. But this is a beautiful, it's a little bit higher tone than what we're used to west of this location, but it's really showing well. And it had the Cadillac barrels, probably 25 to 30% new, of some very expensive, nice barrels from Francois Frere.
We did about 350 cases of this. So
Yeah,
there's not a whole bunch out there, and at the wine club shipment is probably going to be pretty much it. So if you like it, you might want to get more right away.
This is a Swan clone has a tendency to be very elegant, and we're getting that in this rendition. This is really good with just simple pan roasted game. I've done quail with it. I'd like to do squab with it. Just searing the game in a pan and then finishing it in the oven, roasted. Doesn't need much, and it'll really show this wine off, and it'll show the game off too. And I like that about it.
Bailey, how about cheese? Are there any cheese selections that you might consider?
With this, I'd go cow or sheep. Maybe goat, but I'm a big sheep and cow fan. We've got a little blue here, and it's a big hit with it. Doesn't need much. I really like this wine one of the reasons I really like this wine is because I was involved in the Nielsen Vineyard. I farmed it in 1977 when those vines were 13 years old. And it was a big eye opener for me. There wasn't much around back then. Biennacido was only 5 or 6 years old. The vineyard I was farming as well, the Mesa Vineyard, was maybe 5 years old. So I have a real connection to this site. It's elevated. I think one of the shots we have here is taken from Riverbench, where we source Pinot Noir from. And you can see the elevation and how much different it is from those alluvial soils and Riverbench cobble soils of Riverbench, and then the colluvial soils up top that are all gravity fed over the zillions of years.
John Snyder has a comment that he had it with salmon the other night. Really liked it.
You know what? Smoked salmon or grilled salmon, doesn't matter. Right now, we're in our California King season, and it couldn't be a better time to have this wine with some grilled salmon. But it also, there's something about smoked salmon in this wine that really works well.
So Billy, for those out there who are familiar with the area, the Nielsen Vineyard sits right below the old Byron Winery, isn't it?
We're actually, it's about 500 yards east of the Byron Winery.
Okay.
That's for sale. If any of you folks out there have the digi to buy the Byron Vineyard, we'll help you out with it.
Or buy the fruit.
Yeah, and the other thing is, Billy, that same Nielsen Vineyard, there was some Chardonnay planted. Is that the Wente?
That's right, the original Wente that they planted there. And they had this area called the 13 Rows. And Dick and I went in there in the dead of night, took our cuttings and planted them at Tinnaquack Vineyard in 1989. And that clone is just amazing. We actually have 3 versions of Wente up in the Tinnaquack Vineyard. We've got the 5 Rows, which is the stuff that we took from the Nielsen Vineyard. And then we've got some I bought from Dale Hampton as cuttings, which is a little bit different, a little bit more fuller of a cluster. And then we've got the Wente that was heat treated at Davis called UCD 4. And we've got that also, and that retains a lot more acidity for some reason. You tell me. So we usually pick our Wente first. But anyway, let's get back to Pinot.
Yes.
This is a really clean, pretty Pinot Noir right now. And I would actually, these were in my car, I would put this in the refrigerator for like about 30 minutes, no matter what temperature, and just start with it chilled. It'd be really pretty.
And Billy, you put a little more oak on this one than you do normally. New oak. 38% it says. So isn't that more?
38%. We target 1/3.
Okay.
Usually, depending on the vintage, 1/4 to 1/3 new French oak. And the 2018 vintage, in my memory, it was a really kind of no-brainer vintage. We didn't have, like in 17 and like in 2020, a tremendous heat spike or a rain or and these heat spikes are getting more and more common during September and October. Labor Day now, to me, means we're going to get 100, well, it's been 115 in 2017, 120 in 2020.
But we had no big heat spikes.
In 18, it was pleasant. 19 also even more pleasant of a vintage. Kind of just, it's really nice during harvest when you can just kind of comfortably roll through it and not do these extremes and these panic days and panic weekends, and yeah, it gets a little intense.
Billy, maybe you could discuss the ageability?
For this, my ageability on all of our Pinot Noirs, I say best window release to 8 years. But I'm kind of a fruit guy and not a savory guy. So these will be fine for 10, 15 years. It's just whatever your preference is. I like mine a little younger.
We have some congressmen that like that.
Anyway, this is really pretty right now and just starting to open up.
So is the map up right now of the Nielsen Vineyard? What's up on there?
Just you right now.
Okay. So can we move on?
Yeah, let's go on to John Sebastiano.
John
2016.
Sebastiano.
I do have a question here
Okay, go. Shoot.
from Scott Olson, who always has good
Hi,
questions.
Scott.
When did you last make a Nielsen, and will you also do it next year?
No.
This is the only Nielsen we've ever made. And we did source some Chardonnay back in 1988 or 89 from the Nielsen Vineyard. So I'm sorry, this is not the first Nielsen, but we did source some Chardonnay from there. But this was a one-off. We'll see if they offer it again.
Depends on if you get a good score, we probably won't get it.
So did I answer that for Scott?
I think so.
Okay.
Well, Scott,
so,
let us know, Scott, if you have additional questions or if Billy didn't answer it to your satisfaction.
Yeah, we allow follow-ups.
okay, John Sebastiano, planted in 2006, had a really rough go at it because it's such a difficult canyon to farm.
Yeah.
A lot of hills, a lot of steep slopes. But we've had faith in this vineyard from the get-go. We were invited in as they were ripping and disking the ground, and we're able to go up multiple trips and kind of look at all the sites and situations. And we were able to pick a few blocks, and we hopscotched around in there as we learned how the blocks react and how they grow and what the fruit's like.
And aren't there about 40 blocks?
It's a 100 acres of Pinot Noir with each block's 1/2 to 3 acres.
So Billy, I have a good question from Kim, just to backtrack a little bit. How many cases of the Nielsen do we have left after the shipment?
That's not a question for me because
I'll just say.
I would say very few. I would say that probably less than 50.
Yeah.
Right.
So back to John Sebastiano. The 2018 vintage was a turning point for me with how this vineyard produces. And it's really coming on really nice right now. And we've migrated through, like I said, we've hopscotched through these blocks. We're really comfortable where we're at right now. The deal with John Sebastiano is it's either too good a block or too shitty a block, and then the next vintage that'll reverse. It's a very windy situation. So if you get bloom and you get a wind event, you probably get 1/2 ton to the acre. And a lot of that is on the west facing slopes. And we were in a lot of west facing slopes. This wine is a compilation of 3 different blocks. So what we've got is, if you can see in that one picture, there's actually 2 pictures, and one of them's really, okay, this block here. As you can see, John Sebastiano Vineyard, again, like the Nielsen Vineyard, but different AVAs, sits on the east end of the AVA. So again, it's a bit warmer than what we source from La Encantada and Faciega. But that's kind of a good thing, because we start with John Sebastiano and move west as we progress through harvest. And so you don't want to have everything in one location, or it's just a kind of a nightmare when you get that
All at once.
heat wave. So anyway, this is a blend of 3 different blocks. Block 25A, which is clone 667. It's a Dijon clone, and it's always the first one we pick. The deal with Dijon clones is they're very small clusters, small berries, and of course they're going to ripen before all the other clones. And that's kind of it's a good thing, but it's also a bad thing. But
With global warming.
yeah. And then we have block 26, which is Swan clone, like we had in the Nielsen wine. And then block 28, which is the last of the Dijon clone introductions from Entave, Entave being the French version of the US Department of Agriculture. And this is clone 828, Dijon 828. And it's a little bit of a Gamay clone, because instead of coming out and sprawling, it wants to grow straight up. So it's a little bit Gamay-ish.
So Billy, both these wines are SIP certified. You want to tell people what sustainable,
Sustainability in practice just means that you're farming reasonably, and you're recording everything. So if somebody wants to find out, you have all the sources.
Right.
Okay, so it's just
It's
It means we're
accountability.
being socially
it's
responsible.
accountability. Thank you, Jenny. So
Try to move on.
since 2018, we've moved out of 2 of these blocks. Actually, we moved out of all 3 of these blocks, and we're now in 3 other blocks that I'm really, really happy with. One of the problems was we had a wildfire in 2019, and it burned up 2 of our blocks. So we had to move, but because we did move, the wildfire was a good thing, because we discovered these other 2 blocks, actually other 3 blocks, that I'm really, really happy with. And I couldn't be more happier than the 19 and 20. I'm really happy with this 18 because of the way this vineyard's moving now. But the 19 and 20, they just keep getting better. And I think I said that in the wine notes, that as of 2018, just at 12 years old, this vineyard is really becoming a showcase of what the east end of the AVA Santa Rita Hills
Right, can express.
can show. And I actually had this wine I have a brother that's a fisherman in Alaska, and he sends me the best halibut in the world. And so I did beer battered halibut fish and chips. And you dust the chips with just a little bit of paprika, not cayenne. Cayenne's going to be a little too spicy, but just paprika. And this wine and that simple fish and chips was the best. And it makes me want to go back to, there's this little place in Newport, Oregon, that has the best fish and chips in the world. This is funky little place, and I just would love to take this wine up there and have a lunch on the coast in Oregon.
Well, it's certainly showing well, and
Always savory. We don't get a lot of deep berry fruit at John Sebastiano. We always get kind of those really nice marjoram and
Doug,
yeah, and thyme flower and sage, and kind of a weird red fruit, but mulberry. Mulberry, it's always in this wine.
So Billy, maybe you could address sort of in general terms, because you've got now two Pinots, one from Santa Maria Valley and one from Santa Rita Hills. And just in general terms, the differences between the two AVA Pinots?
Well, that's a difficult question because both of these wines sit at the east end of the AVAs, so they're not the best representation of both AVAs. So I would take a core wine from centrally located in the Santa Rita Hills and in the Santa Maria Valley. So you think maybe Block 8 and Fe Ciega or La Encantada. And that's going to be the best example because you're going to see that telltale Santa Rita Hills black fruit, earthy, and kind of more black pepper and some spice, not as much soft spice that we get at John Sebastiano, those leafy herbs. And then from Block 8, you're going to get the complete light red fruit, strawberry, raspberry, and that hard spice of cardamom, clove, and cinnamon. That's the biggest difference. But it's there are differences here, and it's a really good challenge if you guys want to send me notes on what you think of the comparison of these two, because the east ends of the AVAs are so different than just 5 miles west or even 10 miles west.
So east, farther from the ocean.
Yes.
And warmer.
Yeah, and west closer to the ocean, because we get about a 1 degree Fahrenheit change every mile we move up or down.
East or west. Right. All right, so we go on, Billy, should we move on to old?
Are there any questions about the Pinots before we leave the Pinots?
None?
Oh, wait, there is a question here from
Right.
Leslie. Cheese pairing for this one, for the John Sebastiano.
It seems like it wants a little bit more goat than the Nielsen. That's my take.
Why?
It's got this savoriness to it that I think would blend better with the goat cheese. And also, if you could add, a goat cheese that had maybe a little bit of fruit in it or something would really elevate it. And it'd be more of a knockout than just regular goat cheese.
Maybe an herb encrusted one that's covered with
Herb, but also it needs a little kind of dried fruit in there.
Yeah.
Mm. That's really opened up just since we.
Okay, let's move on to one of my favorite places to be, the Vogelsang Vineyard. The Vogelsang Vineyard, it's pretty much been the heart and soul of our 7200 label for many, many, many years. And it's a vineyard we've been associated with since 1999.
When it was planted, right?
Planted in 1998. We got a little tiny bit of fruit in 1999, but in 2000 we bought our first Cabernet from, so we've had a relationship wine-wise since the year, well, 99, but Cabernet-wise since 2000. I remember, I don't know what year it was not too long ago where we actually did a vertical of Vauxhall Cabernets in the cellar. That was very well received, and it was very educational and pretty interesting too for me. We source from 4 different clones at Vauxhall, and so we've got it's pretty much all hillside, sloping to the south. Actually, no. Yeah, sloping to the south. Yeah, you know, Santa Barbara County does turn. So these are hillsides that slope to the south. So a lot of sun. Clone 8, which is the original, what I call the California clone or the Napa Valley clone. Clone 341, which is an Entav clone. When I say Entav, ENTAV, which is the French version of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA. They're the ones that release it to us, and you have to sign and say you're not going to reproduce this or sell it. And then we have the C clone, SEE, which is the C family of the candy franchise, C's Candies. They have a vineyard in Napa, and they have a special, probably a suitcase clone from somewhere. And so we use that. And then what's the other clone? Oh, it's another clone. Oh, 337, which is another Entav clone, which was one of the first to be planted in Happy Canyon. Small clusters, small berries. And then, as I mentioned in the wine notes, in 17, we had that intense heat wave. And Pinot Noir, you never want Pinot Noir to go through 100 plus degrees, especially when it's a few days away from picking, because you get dehydration, and you don't want to make wine out of raisins. Pinot Noir raisins, the wine will taste like Pinot Noir raisins. So, but in Happy Canyon and in Foxen Canyon, where we grow Cabernet Franc, and a little bit of Cabernet at Mamere, because of the skin thickness on these Bordeaux varietals, they can weather it a little bit more, but when the temperature gets over 100 degrees, as soon as it gets 100, everybody turns the water on and starts irrigating, because you want to keep these berries hydrated. And we've been able to kind of push these varietals through these intense heat waves without any damage. Because again,
Good questions.
okay, Cabernet raisins will make Cabernet raisin wine.
All right, so we have some good questions and comments. One from Susie. And what year was that vertical, Billy? Do you remember?
I remember that Jim and Mary Beth Vogelsang were there,
Right.
proprietors. And I remember Matt Ketman I invited, and all the Coastal Vineyard Care farmers who farm that vineyard.
Scott was there.
And I gotta say, it might have been, I'm starting to push things out a lot more, so maybe 2010.
Scott's comment here is he thinks he wants you to do another Vogelsang vertical, please. And he thinks the one that they attended was around 2013 or 14.
Okay.
Sounds about right.
Yes, I am very excited to, once we get through all this pandemic and readjusting of our lives, to get back and start doing some really cool verticals of our wines. And we might be able to do it as maybe a vertical club where we get together 6 times a year and do a vertical in the cellar. And
Whoa,
That'd be fun. So
sounds like a plan, Billy. Let's break that
you,
stuff out.
you heard it here, folks. So just add after the shipment.
Okay, Vogelsang, Happy Canyon, geographically is pretty bitchin' because we've got these east-west running transverse valleys surrounded by transverse ranges. But then all of a sudden we got this hump that comes across the east end of the San Ynez Valley, and it kind of blocks the maritime influence for the most part. And that's where Happy Canyon is. So it's much warmer than the rest of the valley. Warm temperatures. So we talk about diurnal swing and the importance of diurnal swing with grape varieties, because what happens is if you get a 95-degree day and a 45-degree night, those little grapes are going to retain all that acidity. And that's the beauty of Happy Canyon, is that we get those huge diurnal swings, a 40 to 50-degree swing pretty much every day during the summer. And that's amazing. When I do sugar sampling, grape sampling close to harvest, I always start out here in Happy Canyon, and it's actual chilly because I don't want to be out here in the afternoon when it's 90 to 100 degrees. So I work west and sample the valley from Happy Canyon to Lompoc. And by the time you get to Lompoc, you got to put the jacket on because it's foggy and the wind's starting to blow. So it's fascinating for me to be in these two transverse valleys and see the temperature difference of what that makes. And it's the beauty of Santa Barbara County that we can grow all these different varieties here in different places.
Yeah.
Okay, this is, like I said, steak wine. You don't need much. It's a simple steak with a good sauce. If any of you are up here in the near future, we have a new steakhouse in the valley called Sear, and just go in and get one of their steaks and take this wine in with you.
New York steak there. Yes.
Okay, typical, my notes of Happy Canyon Cab are, people talk about Rutherford dust in the Napa Valley, but I talk about Happy Canyon gravel, because we always get this kind of gravelly, cobbly sense on the palate, but we also get a lot of those like Fig Mountain sage or Sisquoc sage, that when you get up, if you're camping back in the backcountry here, you get up out of your tent and the sage is wet in the morning, and that smell is telltale. And that's what this wine always has. And I think that's a big note for Happy Canyon red wines.
So maybe a little sage on the side with some butter with that
Maybe
steak.
sage rubbed,
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
sage rubbed pork chop,
Ooh, yeah.
porterhouse pork chop. It's got to be 1.5 inches and brine it, and then sage rub it before you throw it on the
That'd be
grill,
good
or
with
put
the
some.
John Sebastiano too, maybe.
Yeah, that might work. I would go with tenderloin though with the chase. It's hard for me to have a bone on the plate when I'm drinking Pinot Noir.
The blue cheese too is great
Yeah.
with it.
All right.
It's just-
So this is a really good shipment. I'm really proud of this shipment. 17 Vogelsang, great vintage of this wine. You could sit this down for another 10 years and it's just going to be fine. the John Sebastiano and the Nielsen Pinots, 2018, so they were bottled a year ago in March. They're just starting to open up, but they're fine right now. If you like that kind of young, youthful, fruit-driven taste and flavor. If you don't, just kind of hang on to them and get a few more bottles and open one up every so often and see how it's aging.
Well, and again, like the last wine, we only made about 348 cases, and after this shipment, we're only going to have 30 cases left. So if you like it, you better buy it. Any more
What
words
about-
of wisdom, Billy?
What about ageability, Bill?
Oh, yeah.
Ageability on this?
Didn't I address that already? I said,
Was I listening?
now
Yeah,
through 5 to 8 years, if you like
that was the
them.
Pinot, so,
Yeah, on the Pinots. Oh, on what was that?
yeah.
Yeah. Now it's delicious, decanted. If you want it to be a little more open, and a 17, bottled in 19. Another easy 8 to 10 years, easy. After hearing what Dick said about the Mamere calves they had at the winemaker dinner last night, Dick said 89, but Jenny said 96, so they got their numbers crossed.
It just was like
Actually,
98.
it was 98.
No, it was 96, 2001, and
Okay.
2012.
2001, I know is going to be stellar. 'Cause,
Anyway, the 96 was a real surprise and unbelievably well accepted.
yeah, and if anybody out there doesn't know about the Mamere Vineyard, it's quite a little
Quite little.
situation. It's 4/10 of an acre, dominated by probably a 200-year-old eucalyptus tree.
Mhm.
So you get a lot of eucalyptus oil in the terroir, and it expresses itself as camphor. Or it always reminds me of when we were kids of the Vicks vapor deal. So you could actually take some Mamere and heat it up in your bedroom and use it as nasal
Yeah.
clearance.
And at best, though, we get about 50 cases, and that's at the turkey.
That's
Okay.
it, yeah.
So there's a good question here in under the chat about, can you irrigate when it's over 100 degrees?
Yes, you want to keep those vines hydrated. Yes. So even though they might be transpiring or photosynthesizing when it's 100 degrees, because they're going to be shut down,
Yeah.
you want to have that moisture available when they start to work again.
Yeah.
Because what happens is, like it happens in the wind, okay, a vine wakes up in the Santa Maria Valley, and I'm talking about Bienvenido, and it's foggy, so they don't start working yet. And then finally, the sun comes out about between 9 and 11, depending on the day, and the vines say, "Okay, here we go, we're working." And you got all those solar panel leaves working, and they're all happy. And then the wind starts blowing, and those leaves start cupping, so you're not getting 100% photosynthesis. And that's why we have such a long season in these transverse valleys, is because the vines don't work a long day. We've always said about the vines, we get up at noon and start to work at 1, take an hour for lunch, and then our work is done. And that's how the vines work in Santa Barbara County.
So I have some more questions here.
Sure.
Just one quick one for Dick. It sounds like we had a dinner last night. Does that mean that you and I are back out on the road?
It most certainly does, and
Gradually.
we don't have any that are scheduled at the moment, but we are looking forward to it, and God, it's good to be out there again.
And now, and a question from Lawrence. Can you discuss wait a minute here. Cab VA Pinot growing conditions and the differences in the grape. How is the Cab Franc different from the Cab Sauv?
That's,
Okay. Did he say,
Versus, I think it meant, there's a typo here. Can you discuss Cab versus Pinot growing conditions?
okay, because you said VA. And
I know, I was,
I just
yeah.
went, oh.
So I'm just reading it as it
Okay.
is. I think it's a typo. So
yeah,
Cab versus
as-
Pinot.
I don't know if you all know the genetics of Cabernet Sauvignon, but Cabernet Sauvignon is the child of Cabernet Franc and Sauvignon Blanc. And so Cabernet Franc for me always has that, depending on how ripe you want it, it's always got that pepper, bell pepper, smoked bell pepper, smoked chipotle, roasted bell pepper. And I love that about it. And as long as you can add some of that blueberry flavor in there with it.
Mhm.
And so we when we're growing Cab Franc and picking it, we try to make it that kind of best case scenario of blueberry and smoked chipotle or roasted red pepper. Cabernet Sauvignon is a different animal. It doesn't get that green beanie bell pepper once it gets over that hump of ripeness. If you're picking it at low sugar, of course, it's going to have that, that bell pepper or green bean. But we get a lot of, like, what I want to say, cassis, and in Happy Canyon, again, sage, and kind of that gravelly note,
Mhm.
cassis, plum, not deep red cherry, but kind of a bright cherry.
And I have a comment and a question. So the first one, the comment to both of you from Kim, that she spent a lot of time in my youth with that Vicks stuff, literally Vicks shit smeared all over my chest. So yeah, I know the smell.
Okay, can she pour Mamere all over her chest?
I won't go there. And then Leslie wants to know, are we going to continue to do these virtual tastings post-COVID, that she likes them since she's moved out of California? And I would say, as long as there's interest, we will do that. They've been fun for us. And another question just came in. Which wine do you recommend with ruffles and French onion dip? Good question.
Oh, that's really a good question.
Ooh.
I would do a taste off with the two Pinots because I'm really curious about that. I'm a huge chip and French dip, French onion dip guy.
From the Lipton soup
Oh
pack.
my God, it's just like my favorite to go for munchies.
I think this person's going to have to try it out and let us know the results.
Right now, I would say the John Sebastiano over the Nielsen for ruffles and French onion dip.
Makes me hungry.
I know.
Any more questions there, Jane?
No, okay, Greg. Hi, Greg.
Greg
This
Olker.
is great. The most I've heard Billy talk, and least I've heard Dick talk. See you in a few weeks.
No, I'm going to retire, Greg. Oh my God. So anyway,
Thank you.
Great comments and questions.
Well, we got to give credit for credit is due. We want to thank Riley for visuals and thank Jenny for sound and choreography and master of ceremony. So anyway, thanks.
Thank you, Ryan.
And we will we'll be back in one form or
And so the
another, but
next-
hopefully live next
So the
time.
next shipment will be 1st of October. The
That's
next
right.
web
Will be.
shipment, so,
We'll have
But maybe
back to
we'll,
back.
maybe we'll see you for one of Bill's promised verticals before
oh,
then.
yes. Yeah. So wear your masks, everybody, so we
Or
can
get vaccinated.
get
or both.
vaccinated, so we can all get back to our lives.